So yesterday, ODD put out a video on black goo and the connection to smart dust and nanotechnology. And he did a fantastic job. I was pretty blown away by that, and just kept thinking about it. I was actually up half the night last night thinking about this topic and praying about it, and just researching a little bit more into the whole Morgellons disease and thinking about how this kind of fits together. And it's pretty crazy stuff. But put out a video, however long ago it was, on black goo before, and it was very compelling even then at the time to see how much it really is, being pushed through the movies and propaganda and all that, and then now seeing in the TED Talks and everything. Once again, like so many other things, where it shows up in science fiction, and then you see this, it's starting to roll out into reality or whatever. But at the time, I could definitely see that, okay, there's something going on here, but, I couldn't really tell what it might be. But him connecting it to chemtrails and Morgellons disease, and I mean, there's a lot of compelling evidence to really explore those connections further, and like I said, he did a really good job. But a couple things I don't usually do things where I'm just doing response videos or whatever, but I was so kind of captivated by the topic, but also noticing how many people in the comments and things were, it was freaking a lot of people out. And so I wanted to speak a little bit to that too, as what I suddenly started to realize at this time, for whatever reason, was just the strange connection to the concept of the golem, which Gon Shimura actually does a really good job talking about the whole concept of the golem in Kabbalah and alchemy, and in his documentary Age of Deceit 2, Rise of the Beast Image. And so I'm going to play a little clip from that later to kind of buttress what I'm saying here. If you're not familiar with that and how it connects to Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley, and it's this occult concept that a lot of people do know about, and the Babylon working, which was a ritual that they did out in the desert. But of course, it's still, even in that documentary, there's no kind of clear, we know that these things happened, we kind of know what they're about, we know what the agenda is. But now seeing this connection between this concept of programmable matter, whether it's black goo or any kind of goo, but just the concept of programmable matter absolutely falls under the description of kind of the basic concept of the golem, which goes way back, and even similar to things that are in Hermetic texts as well, where they would actually call down. There was rituals where they would call down, star gods basically into these. They would build these statues for them, and I started learning about that when I was doing some research into Hermeticism in connection with the rise of Copernicanism during the Renaissance and things like that. So, yeah, these ideas are very prevalent and they're very ancient, and so essentially what it kind of would seem to lead to is essentially, I mean, if this is all kind of, obviously we have to be, dutifully skeptical, and this is speculation on my part as well, and I'm not saying this is a fact. I'm just looking at all these pieces and how they tie together. So basically what it would add up to is the concept of like a liquefied nano golem, from my view. And it was interesting because there was even people in the comments talking about actually suffering from Morgellons disease, and just the different discussions going on here, and people talking about it, that these are even in the mainstream explanations of the idea of smart dust and this kind of nanotech. The whole idea is that it's electromagnetically operated. Basically, these things are manipulated by EM waves, and maybe that was the thing, maybe that was the detail that this time kind of made the light bulb come on and triggered it, in terms of how all the other research with cosmology and flat earth and cymatics and electromagnetism, and how all of these things are, the more you look into it, the more you realize that this is all very connected to the spiritual realm. And it keeps bringing you back to that whole concept of the interaction between the spirit and the physical, and that's what the golem concept is all about, right? So when you think about it, if you're talking about some sort of substance that's been created to have us to be uniquely, malleable and then responding to electromagnetic manipulation so that it can, essentially morph and sculpt itself into whatever, or, do things on a microscopic scale, when it enters the human body or whatever, and manipulate your genetics or whatever. That essentially what you're talking about is like a demonized substance, right? Rather than a demon possessed, animal or person or body. It is like in the clip that Gans will show, the original golems were said to be made out of clay, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I don't know, this just kind of came to me yesterday, and then, like I said, all last night. But like I was saying, if people are getting really freaked out by this, which understandably, it's a pretty horrific, dystopian sci-fi kind of scenario. If such a substance really is being just sprayed into the atmosphere or introduced to the populace through all kinds of, ways, yeah, that's pretty terrifying. But at the same time, if we're talking about it is some sort of evil technology, but that it has ultimately the design is so that it is allowing demonic energies to basically, infiltrate your body and your genes and all these things, and really the idea of smart dust I see as being ultimately Satan's way of trying to artificially create his own version of omnipresence and omniscience, right? Because he is limited and finite, and so if he just has little smart dust, basically little tiny microscopic microchips that are just covering everything and in everything and in everyone, then it's a false, counterfeit Holy Spirit kind of idea, because Satan wants to be God. He wants to replace God. So crazy stuff. But if you're talking about something that's ultimately all geared towards, being an avenue for the demonic, the good news with that is that, Jesus has authority over the demonic realm. And if you believe in Jesus, then you can stand in that authority, and you do not have to be afraid of, whatever crazy technology they roll out that is designed to create avenues for, demonic intrusion into your life and into your person. You don't have to worry about that. And that there is, and I mean that with all sincerity, that as crazy as it is, it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of good news to stop and realize that this is probably all just a new, a new high-tech version of a very old idea that in the end has no more power over us than anything that has come in the past. So I definitely wanted to emphasize that. Interesting too, because in one of his examples of Hollywood, propaganda with the black goo, he showed this little clip from the movie Lucy, which I'd never seen, but astounding when you go back and look at this scene where this black goo again is responsible for essentially causing her to evolve into a superhuman. It's a total transhumanist message. But how amazing that, like, while she's that part of this transformation process in this scene, she's there in the room, but simultaneously in her mind, they're depicting all this crazy imagery of what looks like outer space. But what another crazy example of the spiritual realm. It's literally depicting someone being in a process of apotheosis, basically, where it's this enlightenment montage and going through this wormhole tunnel thing, just like at the end of 2001 and so many other movies. And the more I see this same type of imagery being applied in the very similar context of apotheosis, it's just amazing how it all ties it together. The genetic side, the transhumanism side, to the whole cosmology, space being the spiritual realm kind of side, and apotheosis and Luciferianism, and it's all there. So anyways, here is a clip on the Golem by Gans.
In alchemy, it was the 16th century alchemist and occultist named Paracelsus who described how to create the golem, referred to as the homunculus in alchemical terms. In the Hermetic and Alchemical Writings of Paracelsus, he said, quote, "But neither must we by any means forget the generation of homunculi, for there is some truth in this thing, although for a long time it was held in a most occult manner and with secrecy, while there was no little doubt and question among some of the old philosophers whether it was possible to nature and art that a man should be begotten without the female body and the natural womb. In order to accomplish it, you must proceed thus. Let the semen of a man putrefy by itself in a sealed cucurbite with the highest putrefaction, until it begins to live, move, and be agitated, which can easily be seen. If now, after this, it be every day nourished and fed cautiously and prudently with the arcanum of human blood, and kept for 40 weeks in the perpetual and equal heat, it becomes, thenceforth, a true and living infant, having all the members of a child that is born from a woman, but much smaller. This we call a homunculus, and it should be afterwards educated with the greatest care and zeal until it grows up and begins to display intelligence. Now this is one of the greatest secrets which God has revealed to mortal and fallible man. It is a miracle and marvel of God, an arcanum above arcana, and deserves to be kept secret until the last times, when there shall be nothing hidden, but all things shall be made manifest. In more recent times, it was the pioneer rocket fuel scientist and occultist Jack Parsons and the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, who performed magical ceremonies and rituals called Babylon working, carrying on the work done by occultist Aleister Crowley, who called himself the Great Beast 666. Parsons and Hubbard claimed to make contact with the spiritual realm to unleash an entity of a divine female named Babylon. But perhaps the most interesting part of all the rituals performed by Parsons and Hubbard was that of what is called the mannequin. The accounts of the mannequin begins with a huge steel container codenamed Jumbo that accompanied the first atomic bomb explosion on the Trinity site in New Mexico on July 16, 1945. The Brookings Institute released a short explanation of Jumbo in February of 2013, which stated, quote, "As preparations for the first nuclear weapons test, General Leslie Groves, the head of the Manhattan Project, began to worry about what would happen if the test was a failure. With a very limited supply of plutonium then available, a failure could scatter tens of millions of dollars of the precious element across the New Mexico desert. To avoid this problem, a massive steel vessel to contain the explosion was built at a cost of $142 million. Nicknamed Jumbo, the container weighed 214 tons, was 25 feet long, 12 feet wide, and had walls 14 inches thick. According to occult investigators and conspiracy theorists James Shelby Downard and William N. Grimstead, Jumbo contained within it what Aleister Crowley had called the mannequin, an inanimate body which was inundated with nuclear energy, thus producing a real homunculus, or golem. Regardless of whether or not the stories of these occult practices to produce soulless life forms are true or not, it doesn't make much difference with what we are facing on the horizon. What we will come to discover is that Satan's grand agenda is to produce his own golem or homunculi out of the human race, so that we might abandon the image of God in exchange for the image of the beast.
Let me say very clearly, there is no globalism without the spiritual presence behind it. There is no synchronizing and crystallizing the political, the economic, the military, the environmental, the sciences and technologies without that spiritual presence behind. So if we do not look at the entities behind, yes, they are non-human entities, intelligences, as the Nazis called them. They are alien in the sense that they're not of our physical world, but they're not extraterrestrial. They are extra-dimensional. These are beings that have been around for millennia. They are fallen ones, fallen angels. You can say demons, daemonoia, Satanus, Diablos, ancient serpent, and by the Spirit of God, there's designations given to those entities. Now, those entities, as we've said again and again and again, the scriptures bear out the Greek word metaskidzmazatai, the ability to morph and the ability to present a front that is acceptable without changing its nature nature or agenda. Now, that's part of the global deception. That's part of the end-time deception issue. And as Scripture, the Spirit of God has shown us, the broadest, deepest, most controlled, but yet most supranatural deception will be occurring in the last days, a ramping up an evolutionary development to the point of bulging at the seams.